Hello, friends. This is Parag here, your host on Stay Strong podcast. Thank you very much for tuning into this informative session. It's my promise to bring you the best information in the field of kettlebells, kettlebell sport, and strength and conditioning. Today, we have Greg Anderson in house, and he's from Minnesota, US. He got exposed to kettlebells as a hard style first, and then later he discovered kettlebell sport. He has a very huge background of fitness and sports. Earlier, he was into martial arts, so he had that conditioning with him, which really helped him to transition into kettlebell sport very fast. That's a very big advantage for the people who are starting late but have a background of any kind of sport. It's very easy for them. This podcast is an informative session for the people who want to get into the kettlebell sport, who are above 45 and really do not have any kind of direction how to start with. Such kind of master classes, such kind of information, especially with the Greg Anderson, which I'm going to have today, is a little bit of technical information, which will actually come to know that how he is able to train, what kind of nutrition he takes, what kind of supplement he takes, how much rest does he take, if he's training 6 times a week, how does he recover. A lot of information we are going to get from this session. Please help me welcome Greg from US. Yeah, hello friends, this is Parag here. We have Greg from US. Over to you, Greg. Please introduce yourself. What is your name and what is your professional background? And most important, how did you get into the kettlebell sport?
That's a lot of stuff there.
Yes.
Thanks for reaching out. I'm excited about this, so I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Greg Anderson. I just turned 60, and I live in Chaska, Minnesota. For people that are interested in golf, we have a very famous golf course about a mile from my house called Hazeltine.
Okay.
And they had the Ryder Cup there in 2018, and it'll be here again in 2029. But we're located southwest of Minneapolis.
Okay.
So vocationally, I sell real estate. I've been in real estate for about 38 years.
Okay.
But I grew up on a farm in central Wisconsin, a dairy farm. So I grew up, doing a lot of hard work. And so I was attracted to things that required more of a commitment.
Okay.
So I did sports as a young person. I wrestled, and then which is kind of a grind. And so you're used to the kind of that grinding, that sort of grinding notion. You're trying to make weight. You've got some guy that's trying to punish you, and you're trying to inflict punishment on them. And so the training kind of lent itself. So then over time, I moved away, and I got a little bit away from fitness. When I moved to Texas, because I thought I wanted to work on an oil rig, and realized I didn't like Texas. And I moved to Minnesota, and I got a job teaching Nautilus. And I knew enough about weightlifting that I had never seen a Nautilus machine before, but I went to the library and I got a book, and I got a job and teaching it, which was kind of funny. And it was at a karate school. Offline, we had mentioned that we had a martial arts background.
Yes.
It was a Taekwondo school that originated from Jun Rhee, and Jun Rhee is the person who came up with the safety pads, the foam hand pads and foot guards.
Yes.
And the people that owned the school that I worked for Jun Rhee in Washington, and they moved to Minnesota. Okay. And so one of the owners was actually one of the color commentators for the original Full Contact Karate on ESPN. Okay. And there were 3 full contact champions that were in that school. And I worked at I taught the way they had a little health club up above. It was neat. They had 3 classrooms. And then on the weekends we would, after classes, then we'd have a lot of sparring sessions. And there were, this is back in the early 80s. So, there were some crazy people.
Okay.
And so the kettlebells came about a number of years later. I actually got exposed to hardstyle through Pavel Satsulin, and it was my wife and I we hadn't been working out as much as I'd wanted to. This is in the early 2000s. Okay. And we did Body for Life, and if you recall Bill Phillips' book, Body for Life, they do the picture of the person, the before and after pictures, and it was basically you worked out you did 3 weightlifting days a week, you did 3 cardio days a week, you ate 6 meals a day, but he had a magazine at the time, and there
Okay.
was this article by this Russian guy, and it was he talking about these different things that we had kind of learned intuitively through the karate, right?
Okay.
Like, for
Yes.
example, high tension stretching, right? We would hold people's leg in a side kick and then have them push us into the floor, and then
Yes.
you'd realize if you relaxed, you could go higher.
Yes.
And so he's talking about all these things that we knew, so it resonated.
Okay.
And my daughter at the time was a competitive ice skater,
Okay.
and all of a sudden I get this thing in the mail, and there's Pavel. He's
Okay.
on the cover of this mailer, and he was doing a workshop. So I brought my wife and daughter down to go see this guy, and he so that to help her with her flexibility. And they had just introduced power to the people, and then the kettlebell, the introduction to the kettlebell. And so he's like, well, you should buy one of these.
Okay.
And I bought one, and I didn't know what I was doing, of course, and it's coming around and it's smacking my arm. And I thought, well, this sucks, I'm gonna end up with a broken arm.
Yes.
And so they had an instructor certification class, and I thought I would be very clever. And I called him and I said, I'm the guy with the daughter. And, oh yeah, I remember you. And I said, you're teaching this class. And it happened to be in Minnesota because the publisher was from Minnesota, and Pavel's actually married to somebody from Minnesota. So he
Okay.
ended up from Russia, living here in the Twin Cities.
Yes. Yes.
And he had a class. And
Mhm.
so as it turned out, it was right around 9/11. So they had all these people that had canceled,
Okay.
and they had a rollout. They had magazines. They had Men's Journal and Fitness and Health coming to, observe this new thing. And so they needed bodies. And so he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And so I came. So I showed up, and I'm the dopey real estate guy. And there's guys from Special Forces, there's guys from the U.S. Department of Energy, there's police officers. Anyway, it just turned into a thing. So I was doing that over a period of time. And then fast forward, you had mentioned offline about Jerry Gray, who is
Yes.
just amazing. He's had multiple health challenges, and he's still, throwing bells around.
Pushing. Yeah.
And so I had somehow connected with him on social media, and then he talked about, saw the competitions, and I thought, well, I think I could do that, and so that's kind of how it started. I'd been lifting bells for a number of years, but I started, and I found another guy in the Twin Cities, Jordan Kunderwright. He has a kettlebell podcast as well called The Platform.
Okay.
And so Jordan and I were meeting, and so I think we kind of joked that we were 1 in a million, because there's a couple million people in the Twin Cities, and there were 2 of us in the Twin Cities Kettlebell Club.
Okay. Okay.
So that's kind of how it started. I know it's a long story, but that's kind of how that was the beginning of the competitions, and at this point that was 5 years ago, or a
Okay,
little over
so
5 years ago.
did someone introduce you, or you just happened to go to one of the sporting event and you came across this, and then you thought that let's get me into this because this seems interesting? How did it work? Because what has happened is to whoever I have introduced, most of the people have some kind of a background. I mean, if someone has a martial arts background, that really helps people to get into the kettlebells faster because they are better conditioned. So, how was your liking when you actually saw it? So it was like because the martial art thing, or it was like just okay, I wanted some switch.
I think going back to that sort of masochistic tendency that wrestlers have or martial artists have, if it's really hard and people think, oh my God, that's terrible, you think, oh, I got to do it. Right. And that's kind of happened over the years. It's not like I never worked out. Like, I was doing kettlebells, but I ran when I got my black belt. I started running marathons. I started racing sailboats. We were doing kettlebell was sort of the foundation. I was doing cross country ski marathons, which is arguably as hard as kettlebell, if not harder, because you're just out longer.
Yes.
These 50-kilometer cross country ski races through the Chequamegon National Forest in Wisconsin, and kettlebells was kind of always my sort of go-to. Like, I could do, the cardiovascular component of doing high repetitions. I don't know if you're familiar with Kenneth J, but he had a thing called the cardio code, and it was basically like you played around with your work rest ratios, right? So it was about, anywhere from a third workload, 2/3 rest to 50/50 work rest ratios. And so I started playing around with a lot of that stuff. And because I've been working out since I've been 14 years old, if I like to be engaged intellectually with what I'm doing. It's like, and I like to have a purpose, so having something to work for gets my big butt out of bed in the morning, right? I mean, I live in Minnesota right now. It's -8 Fahrenheit.
Yes.
And, so if you're laying in bed and you think, oh gosh, do I want to get up and work out? The answer is, well, hell no. It's cold. It's nice in this bed, right? But if I have a purpose, it's like, okay, but I have this event coming up. Well, now I get my butt out of bed and, and start, the habits. And so it gives me a purpose and a reason to go. So the bells, I got involved with CrossFit a little bit, and they really bastardized, kettlebell and CrossFit, and so just these different things. The competition, seeing people competing, and I just know, I'm thinking, I think I can do that.
Okay.
And then, started. So my first competition was in Chicago. I drove to Chicago.
Okay.
And I had a interesting conversation with my wife. I said, I'm going to this competition in Chicago. It's about a 6-hour drive. I said, you're welcome to come along. However, you can't make fun of people. Because I said, I know this is a dork fest, but these are my dorks. I'm a dork. You can come along if you want, but you can't bag on anybody. And not that she would, but I kind of didn't want her to come, actually. I was kind of hoping I'd just go and, have a guy's weekend, but she came along, and we met so many cool and really fun people, because they tend to be people that are experiential. They tend to be people who want these experiences. They want to be challenged, and they work their asses off. They're out there and they're kicking butt. And so she was impressed. And so it started to evolve. We did the Cali Open. We flew out to Oakland. So now it's easier. So now she likes the people, and now we're going to go somewhere to do these competitions. So she's all on board.
Wow.
So we flew out to California and did an event out there. They were actually going to have a workshop. Dennis Vasiliev and Kim Fox were going to be doing a workshop.
Okay.
And at the time, this was right before COVID.
Okay.
And Dennis got married in Europe and wasn't able. He was having trouble getting his wife back into the U.S.
Yes.
So they ended up canceling the workshop.
Yes.
But I ended up getting a private lesson with Kim. Kim is, if for people who don't know Kim Fox, she's arguably the best lifter in the United States, I think.
Yes.
Just
I interviewed
phenomenal.
her in Portugal. You must have seen that interview. I have interviewed her, and it is there on my YouTube channel. You can just check that out. Yeah,
Terrific.
sure. Yeah, she's best. Yeah, she has done really well for herself and for her country, and I guess she's helping a lot of people to lift kettlebells. That's also really great.
She is. I'll say hi to her for you, because I'm going to see her
Oh, okay.
I'm going to see her a week from Saturday on the 18th
Okay.
for a qualifying event for UKL.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they've got 4 events across the US as a qualifier for the Worlds in Hungary in June.
Yes.
And so we're driving down to Wichita to do the event, and so I'll be doing half marathon and 10-minute snatch.
Wow. Great. Now, say you mentioned that you have done hardstyle earlier because you get started with your hardstyle. You took lessons from Powell, and then now you're doing soft style because kettlebell sport is more soft style. What difference do you find in this? I mean, to say in the terms of your fitness.
I feel as though I'm in better condition than I've ever been, but doing I'm doing a pretty significant. I'm training for marathons, so I'm doing pretty significant volume. So the way that I'm setting up my my periodization is in tonnage.
Yes, absolutely.
It's not, and so from a general preparedness standpoint, right now I feel like I'm about as solid as I've ever been, even though I'm getting older. I still feel, I feel like I'm pretty in really good condition. The hard style, I enjoyed doing that, but there's just sort of it's a little cultish isn't the right word, but a little bit territorial about the methodology. And in the course of meeting different people, like meeting John out at Orange, and he was talking about how everybody thought they were pretty badass doing hardstyle, and then a bunch of them with like Steve Cotter and a bunch of these guys went to Russia, and there were 14-year-old girls kicking their ass, you know, and it feels a little bit more natural, to be doing sport because it's about this efficiency of total body movement as opposed to this rigidity of make it as taxing as possible versus as efficient as possible to to get through a particular workload, which is more consistent with sport. It's more consistent with just the way you do life, right? One of the problems I had with the CrossFit, as an example, was that they were constantly cycling 1 rep max. So they were on like a 6-week small off, cycle for 1 rep max in deadlift, squat, and bench. And I said, we have this disproportionate risk with a bunch of older people because if you fail on a back squat, you have this exponential. The risk reward is not there. You have this exponential risk of substantial injury.
Yes.
To we had, let's say, 15 people in the 5 a.m. session that I would go to. 12 of us were over 40, and 14 out of the 15 were primary breadwinners. Okay. And it's like if I end up with a major spinal injury, that doesn't just affect the athletic portion of my life, that affects my entire life.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
In terms of income, but quality of life and so on. And one of in the conversations I had with the owners multiple times, I was trying to explain to them that there's, at least from my perspective, 90% of the people come for 2 reasons. They want to be able to do stuff, right? I mean, I want to pick up my grandchild. I want to be able to put a suitcase in the overhead bin. If I go to Colorado, I want to hike a flat, be wrecked for 4 or 5 days, right?
Yeah.
And the second reason, I want to look better naked. Yeah. Right? I mean, right? Yeah. If you think about it, the majority of the people, those are the 2 outcomes, right? Absolutely. Now you've got this little 10% that want to compete.
Yes.
And yes. So and the cool thing is if you compete, you get the other 2 for free.
Yeah. And very, very few people know about it.
Exactly. Yes. So it's been fun. And I think that the translation in terms of efficiency of movement, and I love the challenge of it too, because I know that you mentioned the contrast between it. It's literally like, okay, if this is hardstyle, I need to go do the exact opposite.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah,
and both are different.
That required a shift, which really reignited my passion for kettlebells.
Okay.
Because I'd gotten pretty good at hardstyle, but it's just, and Pavel used to say, it's like your workouts, they're the same but different. But over 10 or 15 years, it's like, okay, there's not a lot of distinction, right? It's like, make this as hard as possible. Where this is like, okay, how do I get better so I can get a few more reps in the same? And I love the measurability of sport because I can see, am I getting more done in the same amount of time? It kind of goes to there's 2 sort of tenets of CrossFit. There's AMRAP, as many rounds as possible. So you have a fixed time thing, and it's like, how many times can you do it? And then the other one is for time, which is I'm going to hit a particular rep count, and how quickly can I do that?
Yes.
And sport lends itself to both of those ways of measuring your progress, so that you've got something that you can look back on and say, is this working or not?
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good insight, actually, because both schools are different, and both schools are like, kettlebell sport definitely is more of a sport style. Hard style is more of a fitness, because they have their own principles and they have their own training programs. Similarly, we also have, as a kettlebell sport athlete and maybe coach, maybe if you're also into training, we also have our set of programs. So both schools are different, but the transition which you mentioned it makes sense. And now at your age, when you're doing more of endurance activity, which actually you need more, because you need to get your endurance up, you need to get your heart stronger. And I think kettlebell will be absolutely suited, because many men we see, like above 60 to whoever I am interviewing, they are having the same advantage of getting physically fit, because they are getting their heart more stronger. So, so that's a very good insight. Now, I would like to know, what challenge do you really get when you're actually pushing yourself very hard at this age? Is it a mental, physical, or any other challenge? Because at times, if you're doing marathons, say for example, if you're doing 20 kilos, 1 arm long cycle at 10 RPM, and you know you're able to maintain the pace up to 20 minutes, but your pace starts dropping. So, what challenge do you get at this age? What are your limitations? Is it mind or is it body?
It depends on the day, of course. I did Worlds in Belgium, and you know how some days you come in, and I mean, I think it has to do with just your what am I trying to say? Shoot, I just had
Pace.
a mental. Yeah, you know how you do your heart rate variability.
Huh,
And
okay.
and so, just some days you have it, some days you don't, right? So we travel all the way to Belgium so that I can
Okay.
do this event. I bring my wife, my daughter comes down from Germany with my now son-in-law.
Okay.
And some days you grab the bell, they just fly, right?
Yeah.
And some days you grab the bell and you're like, shit, did this thing get mismarked?
Yes.
And anyway, that day was the latter. So I'm out there and it feels heavy. Part of it was I had to put a 2 pound magnet on it. So there was a little bit of displacement in the center of gravity, just threw a little off. And maybe it was the travel, maybe, a little bit of jet. I don't know what it was, but it felt like I thought, God, this can't be the right weight. And so you're standing there. So you've got the physical component, right? It's hard, but the game is always mental. I
Yes.
mean, you're familiar with David Goggins, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
put in your own catheter. You don't need to stop,
yeah. Yeah, that is
right?
a crazy guy. He's too
So,
much.
so yeah, but it's that same idea. It's like, so you're having this conversation with yourself because generally the physical limitation, I mean, unless you're hurt, the physical limitation is mostly mental. It's basically your mental way of sort of putting in a stopgap to protect yourself. But generally, you're protecting yourself far below where you're at the risk of physical injury. I mean, there's very few people who have the mental fortitude to push through. And I mean, if they're conditioned, okay, I should make a big caveat by that. If they're properly conditioned, very few people have the mental fortitude to push themselves to the point that they're at danger physically. It's almost always a mental thing.
Mental.
I mean, if
Okay.
you have a breakdown, you hurt your thumb. I mean, I don't know if you've ever, like, when you're on your backswing, are you pinky first or thumb first
I
when
do
you're,
both combination. I'm
yeah,
a mostly thumbs up position.
have you ever caught your thumb on your shorts?
No, it's
Yeah,
I
you
know.
do not want to do that because it bends your thumb that way. It takes about 3 months for your thumb to heal.
Yes.
Um, so if you had some kind of physical thing, that's different. But I'm just talking about, you're just in the grind. You're in, there's this expression, embrace the suck, right?
Yes.
I mean, and you're just in that mud. To me, it's mostly mental, and I don't know that that's any different than it was when I was 15 years younger and I was doing, cross country ski marathons. You're out there on the woods and you're 40 kilometers into a race and you're on a hill and you've got lactic acid, your legs are cramping, your lungs are burning, and you just want to quit, but you're so cold in your middle of the forest and you realize if you stop moving, you stop generating heat and I'll probably freeze to death and die. So it's like, well, the alternative is I better keep going. And then you get through it and then you're happy that you did it. And I
Yeah.
think that's the same thing with, that's been my experience almost on every set I've done, whether it's a 10-minute set or 30-minute set,
Marathon.
a half or a full. It's just living in the muck of where you're all those reflexes that you have of comfort and relaxing are screaming at you, and you have to have dominion over your own thoughts.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Okay.
and I love that, but that's what I like about it
Okay.
is it's
Okay.
it's hard,
Yes.
and when you're done, you feel like, okay, that was something. Some people they'll say, oh yeah, I did kettlebells once, or whatever, and I just smile. I mean, I don't need to check everybody. I just sort of smile, and like I'll mention to my wife, I'm like, I don't think people have any idea how freaking hard this is.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
Only the people who live know it. That's it.
Yeah. Like my session last night was 23,000 pounds total workload. And like people don't get how hard that is. That's a
Yes,
lot,
yes,
you know.
yes.
But anyway, sorry, I'm kind of getting off in the weeds, but
Yeah, yeah. Now, you tell me two big advantages you have got at this age of 60 lifting kettlebells. Those advantages which you have never imagined. For example, at the age of 55 or maybe 50, if you're not lifting kettlebells, I'm not sure. When did you start lifting kettlebells?
well, I
At
was
the,
hardstyle when I was 40-ish.
okay. No, but kettlebell
And then,
sport,
oh, kettlebell sport, I would have been, 57
57. Okay.
or
So,
56. But yeah.
okay. So at the age of 50, you were still in some sport, right?
Mhm.
Doing some kind
Yeah,
of
active.
fitness,
Yeah, active. Yeah, I
active.
was doing
And
probably
at
more
60,
involved in CrossFit.
you're more active. So what is, if you compare yourself at the age of 50 and compare yourself at the age of 60, what are the two biggest advantages you have got at this age of 60? If you can just share that. It can be anything,
less,
physical, anything.
less competition, that's for sure.
Do you know Carol Addy?
I don't. I don't.
Okay, so she mentioned I feel 20 years younger. I said, okay, she's 60 around, she's also around 60, she's lifting kettlebells.
Mhm.
So that was a very good answer. So, I mean, I want your answer. What do you really feel at
I,
this age of 60?
I feel good. I feel strong. I mean, there's all the feedback has been positive. The only thing is with marathon training is the time commitment.
Yeah, yeah.
I work out twice a day. Um,
Twice a day.
yeah, well, I do. It's more in the mornings. It's a slow hike. And
Okay,
so in the mornings I used to go longer mileage. Certainly during COVID, I was averaging 12, 15,000 steps a day. And I
okay,
do kind of a it's sort of my base cardio. So what
okay,
I do is I take the dog, we go, and I go as fast as I can while maintaining nasal breathing.
okay,
So that's the regular. I used to have a heart rate monitor and fool around with it. It's harder with kettlebell with the monitor, the straps move, you lose your connection, and it was just getting annoying. And then I read Brian McKenzie's book. I don't know if you know Brian McKenzie, Laird Hamilton, Gabby Reese. They've got this whole, they're real into like Wim Hof, nasal breathing, moderation. And so basically in the mornings, it's sort of it's sort of my cardio base.
okay,
And I get fresh air. I listen to podcasts. It's kind of like my personal time, right?
okay, okay,
And then I do kettlebell. So that's every day. And we
okay,
couple miles, but again, as fast as I can do it, but I have to maintain nasal breathing. So that's
okay,
the modulator. So that keeps me from going anaerobic because
okay,
there's a real steep hill where I live. So I go down the hill,
okay,
come back up the hill, and
okay,
so the hill is the way that I can see how am I doing. It's also a
okay,
way to kind of calibrate where am I? Did I get enough sleep? How's my, I'll get all kinds of feedback because I can't maintain my pace with
okay,
nasal breathing. And the other
okay,
thing that just a little pro tip that I found is that if I'm listening to podcasts when I'm walking, I have to increase the speed of the podcast to sort of then it acts as more of a metronome to my pace. So I'll
okay,
listen to podcasts at 2 times speed instead of regular speed. Because if I'm going at this pace and someone's talking to me at this pace, there's a disconnect in my head.
disconnection. Yeah, yeah,
And
got it.
so that having the pace that I'm talking to you at
Yes,
while I'm doing that works. And then I do kettlebell practice 3 times a week.
okay,
So first practice is heavy, more of a hypertrophy type thing. So I'm working with, 28 or 30 kilo bells. So it's shorter sets.
okay,
I'll get my reps in, and then I may do, I'll play around with the waves. But again, the way I'm waving it is by cumulative poundage.
okay,
So then my second kettle, and then so the 3 practices. So the second practice is kind of a mid weight. So for me, that would be like 24 kilo,
okay,
and I'll do longer sets. And so I'm always playing around with the work to rest ratio, and I'm playing around with how long I'm going. So I'm doing 1 arm long cycle. So I'll play around with how many reps I'll do before I switch hands.
okay,
So in competition, I might be switching hands. I could go, if I go at 10 reps per hand, I'm going to fatigue faster than if I'm going 7 reps per hand.
Okay.
right? Or 5 reps per hand. So
Absolutely.
that's what I'm playing around with, is that ratio, of rest to work ratio.
Okay. Got it.
And so like a medium weight. And then on the third session will be my competition weight. And then those are much longer sets. So like
Okay.
last night was a long one. So I did 100 reps. I did a 100 rep set. I did another 100 rep set. I did a 200 rep set. And then I did another 100 rep set.
Wow.
And
Okay.
but with a very low rest period in
Rest
between,
period.
because I'm
Okay.
yeah because I'm going to be competing in half marathon in a couple of weeks. So I only had like a 3 to 4 minute rest in between. Basically, I just wait till my heart rate, till I kind of hit baseline, and then I go again.
Okay.
And so then the off days, so my GPP days, I'll do 2 days of weights and 1 day of just kind of long cardio. So I'm just focusing on getting stronger. So on my
Okay.
weight days, so my primary is either deadlifts, and I use
Okay.
two-hand overhand grip on deadlift, and then I'll
Okay.
do supplemental work like lat pulls or various types of pulling. So I'll
Okay.
have basically it's a push-pull day is basically
Okay.
how I do the two weight days. And then the third day of GPP is I usually do I'll just do a long duration on a rowing on a concept two.
Okay.
So like last week, 45 minutes on the rower. And I
Okay.
tried again trying to maintain nasal breathing, and because I think there's a good translation. There's a number of people that I follow online. Dell, and I'm sorry, I'm escaping. Dell's a coach with the UK team, and he does a lot of, rowing as a supplemental work because there's no
Supplemental
impact.
exercise. Okay.
Yep. And so, 45 minutes on the rower, it's as monotonous as a half marathon set, but then maintaining form, maintaining the breathing, keeping a good cadence. And then again, it's a little bit more of a flex on the mental portion of it,
Okay.
like, okay,
Yes.
just staying in there.
Yes.
It's that, embracing that grind.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then and
Okay.
then then one day of the week I hike for fun, and then take the rest of the day off. So that's kind of when I'm in session, that's kind of how it goes. And then with respect to the kettlebell practice, it's a series of waves. The periodization table is basically tonnage waves or
Okay.
collective poundage waves,
Okay.
and to get to the point. And basically the way that I came up with that is I took marathon running and cross country skiing and kind of applied that same notion.
Okay.
X% 80% of your race, right, of your output, and
Okay.
then kind of
Got it.
broke that back, and then I just did it as a percentage. So I have a target number of reps I want to hit in competition, and then I kind of use that. I pad that a little bit, and then I work backwards with respect to percentages of workload to lead to that, trying to have some kind of a peak.
Okay. Okay. So you're working out for say 3 + 2, 5 times a week, 6 times a week, pretty
Six
much.
times.
Pretty. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And Sunday you take off mostly.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, if you're working out for 6 times a week, you probably are working out for say maybe 1.5 hours a day average, right? Correct me if I'm
Hmm.
wrong.
Yeah, that's
So,
about right.
how do you take care of your recovery? So, my question is, recovery is very important when you're training very hard, first. Secondly, when you're training at this age, of course, you have a very good conditioning background. So, definitely the recovery will not be so challenging. But this podcast is for the people who really want to get started with the kettlebell or kettlebell sport, how they should pay attention to the recovery if they're getting started at the age of 45 or 50. Is it,
That's an
of
excellent.
course, it's nutrition for sure, rest is for sure, but apart from that, what do you take care of? So maybe if you can just highlight on it.
Really trying to be in tune. There's a difference between sore and pain.
Yeah.
Being sore is muscle fatigue, being sore is maybe being a little bit fatigued. But also what I try to pay attention to is my collective energy. So for example, this week, my day job got in the way a little bit on Monday, and I just wasn't feeling, I was just feeling a little excess fatigue. So then I'll drop a rest day in, and I just take everything and slide it over. So I kind of look at it as 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3, but not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And so if I'm at a high level of fatigue, I like to tease. One of the things that I'll tell young people, I'll go to the club and young guys will come up because I'm old enough to be their grandpa half the time. And they're like, dude, what's up? And I'm like, and they're like, well, they'll say, oh, you're strong or whatever. And I say, the key to being strong when you're an old man is not do stupid shit when you're a young man, right? And so you you need to, like good form, right? But then paying attention. I don't know if you're familiar with like muscle response testing, but you can test, so you can establish a base test. It's kind of what the chiropractor does when they hold your arm out and then they press down and they'll touch different, acupressure points on
Points.
your body.
Yeah.
And so you can do that with a physical movement, right? You can establish a base movement. So for me, what I'll do is I put my feet together, I'll bend over. As soon as I feel any sensation at all, and generally when you bend over, you feel it like around your kidney region. You feel a
Yeah.
little sensation, and then I take my fingernails and I just mark my leg. So now I have a benchmark. And
Yeah.
then I'll do like the motion of like the kettlebell motion, which in my case would be a press, and then I bend over again. If it doesn't test the same or better, then I have to back off of that movement,
Okay.
right? Because it's my body saying, no, 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 don't, put a cork in it, guy, just take it back. But a
Yeah.
lot of times and at this point for me, it's a little bit more intuitive where if I just feel like I'm completely exhausted and it requires like everything I do I want to be completely exhausted at the end of the workout. If I'm completely exhausted before I go to work out, I have like we were talking about with the CrossFit. I have this trying to get 1 rep maxes. I have this disproportionate amount of risk to have serious injury. And so I need to dial that back. So you have to pay attention to your body. But again, you have to make the distinction between being sore, being fatigued. There's a difference between fatigue and exhaustion. There's a
Yes.
difference between sore and pain,
Yeah.
you know? And
Absolutely.
so, over time, I've had the advantage of doing that. So if I was starting off, I'd just be mindful. Am I a little bit sore, or am I, is something really wrong?
Okay.
And I've worked around injuries and things. I've got a tear in my labrum. I tore a bicep tendon. I mean, I've had things that have happened over the years. Nothing, by the way, with sport. I mean, nothing serious. I mean, some, little tinge in your back or whatever. You mentioned, nutrition, obviously, sleep, proper rest.
Okay.
Chiropractics for me has been useful.
Okay. So
Um,
you take daily massages? I mean, weekly massages, not daily, but weekly massages? No.
No, just a treatment, and I'm on an every other week treatment and if I'm prepping for a competition and once my workload gets into that,
Heavy. Yeah.
yeah, pre-competition where I'm like I'm getting close to my outer limit, then I'm going more often.
Okay.
And as soon as I believe in the notion of kill the monster when it's little, right? If I have
Yeah.
an ache, like, okay, I'm not going to wait till next week for my appointment. I'm going to call, I'm going to get in. Like, let's get on this right now.
Yeah. Stitching time saves nine.
Yep, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And how about nutrition? Maybe we can just highlight on it. Like, if do you take supplementation like vitamin C, vitamin E, extra supplementation, or are you vegetarian, non-vegetarian? What is your food limits? How much quantity of food, fat, carbs, protein do you have? Maybe you can just help
I'm
people
not,
understand about it.
that's probably the part that I could make the most improvement in. It's not something my wife is a good cook. We do a lot of, and we tend to eat primarily organic,
Okay.
ideal meals for me, high protein, lots of vegetables, complex carbs, sourdough bread. I mean, I'm not a no carb person, but I'm fairly low carb. If I have a kid, I have to be for me personally, I have to be mindful of healthy fats because I have a sweet tooth. And
Ah,
so, getting like a beef broth, having some kind of beef broth or a chicken broth, avocados, if I can increase my fat content with appropriate fats, it satiates the sweet urge.
yes.
Otherwise, I'll eat any damn sugar thing that you put in front of me. We went to do you ever fly Delta? Have you ever flown on
Yeah,
Delta
yeah,
Airlines?
yeah,
Okay,
yes,
the little cookies they give you on
yes,
the
yes,
airport? Okay,
yes.
so when we were in Belgium, that's called oh no, speculous. And my wife bought it by mistake. She thought it was peanut butter.
Okay.
And it's basically those little cookies from Delta, if that was, imagine that as a paste. And she's like, oh, I don't like this. And I tasted it. I'm like, oh my, I'm like a heroin addict. I was like, oh my God.
Okay, okay.
But by and large, that's probably where I could make the biggest improvement. But I try to be much more mindful of, I try to eat within a window. I mean, I'm not a hardcore intermittent faster, but I try to eat within an 8 hour
Window.
feeding window. So
Okay.
I'm typically on a 8-16, 8 hours feeding window, 16 hours of fasting.
Okay.
I try to make sure that I'm consuming a lot of water. That's probably the biggest challenge is, when your workload gets to a certain point because you're perspiring so much
Yes.
and, is making sure to keep that fluid up because I think at
Yes.
my age, kidney health is really important. I mean, I don't want to be on dialysis in 20 years because I was lifting kettlebells, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Okay. Wow. So, any supplementation do you take? Protein shakes or something like that?
yeah, I do. We have organic whey that I'll do, and then I
Okay.
take a multivitamin. But again, I think if my diet's appropriate, every time I do supplementation, the way that I'm try to pay attention to what's going on with my body, and I'll notice if I have too much supplementation, it looks like I dump sweet tarts in the bathroom while I'm urinating, and
Okay.
you can almost see the
Yes.
concentration of yellow. And I just don't know that at least my urologist had said that that's not particularly helpful for your kidneys.
Okay.
So if you're over, and so that's a good way to measure if you're getting too many vitamins and you're just simply peeing it all out. It's number one, it's expensive. Number two, it's really not particularly healthy for you.
Okay.
So I'm
Okay.
trying to get as much nutrition as I can in my foods, and that's
Food.
really about, with respect to vegetables, making sure that there's a wide array of colors, in those, and then, trying to eat clean meat. I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, so I have an affinity for cheese, which probably isn't necessarily that great for me.
Yeah.
But one of the advantages is when you're doing the type of volume that I'm doing is that, the color, I need calories.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes. Yes. It's a 30-minute workout is like you really need a good amount of fat as well, actually, to be very honest,
mhm.
because carbs, so definitely we'll have, but I think carbs is an instant energy. But if you have fat, then that will really help you. So yeah, I
Well,
mean,
and
of course,
simple, well, and then the distinction between simple carbs and complex carbs. I mean, you're eating if it, carbs are carbs, right? If you're having white bread, that's one thing. But if you're having, I don't know, like sweet potatoes or something, or there, I mean, not all carbs are equal. And I have a friend, and he said there's two types of people in the world: people who like carbs and freaking liars. so, so so I think it's like and part of that from a longevity standpoint is sort of all things in moderation, right? I
yes,
mean, if I was doing, if I'm eating like hardcore keto, it's like, yeah, you're going to get a short-term result, right?
yes,
But is this sustainable? Is this something you're going to be able to do? Is this the way you want to live your life? You know?
yes,
I mean, if you have a significant other, it's like, really? I mean, you go to a nice restaurant. I'm not going to be like, okay, I want a baked, I want a grilled chicken, no bun. I want, I mean, if I'm going to go, and so we're much more intentional about when we go out. We're very intentional about where we go to eat, and okay, this is going to be an experience, and I'm going to be in the moment in that experience, and then I get back on.
yes,
Have you read Atomic Habits?
yes. James
Yeah,
Clear.
one of the things that he said is that I like that I think is just that I've really tried to take to heart is if you can fall you can do something one time. It's not going to wreck everything. Now, if you do
Yeah.
it two times, that's the beginning of a new habit,
Yes,
right? And
absolutely.
so
Yes.
if you and your significant other, my wife and I were go out to dinner, and I was like, well, it's an Italian restaurant. Okay, I'm gonna be in the moment, but then I need tomorrow. I can't do it again tomorrow, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
and so I think from a longevity standpoint, for at least for me, that's worked well, as opposed because I've done some real hardcore diets, and then you get very dogmatic, and then you screw up, and then you're like, oh, to hell with it. I mean, I think there's a human tendency around that where if you're a little bit more, give yourself a little more grace and a little more forgiveness, where okay, I understand what I'm making a conscious choice. And I think that's really the big thing about food is this a choice or is this a default?
yeah, yeah,
Again, with Atomic Habits, like, okay, add friction for the things that you don't want to do, grease the skids for the things that you do want to do. So if you want to eat healthier, have healthy options that are easy, right? If
yes,
every time I wanted to eat healthy, I have to take an hour off and I got to warm up the stove and cut the, peel the, cut everything. I mean, and it's just going to be time consuming. It's easier to just grab pretzels and some cheese, you
Yes,
know,
yes, yes, yes,
and,
absolutely.
or fast food, or like when you're out, it's easier to hit a drive through than it is to just make a conscious choice. So I think that having that little extra step, making it, just adding a little bit of friction between the things you don't want to do and the things you do want to do, I think that's better from a longevity standpoint, because anybody can do anything for a short period of time,
Yes,
you know.
yes,
But
yes.
nobody cares how fit I was. You're the only one who's ever asked how fit I was 10 years ago. Nobody cares how fit I was 10 years ago. I don't care how fit I was 10 years ago. I care what I'm today
Today, yeah,
and
yeah.
tomorrow and 5 years from now. I mean, am I going to be doing something that I can still be doing 5 years from now?
Yes, yes, that's important. Yeah, and you have done seems like a lot of research even on the nutrition, because yeah, you are quite picky. I personally feel that maybe if it is come to selection of the food, then probably you might have one or two options before you really pick something for your complex carbs, maybe for the protein, maybe for the fat, like if you want to have avocado, or maybe if you want to go with the beef or something like that. So it's really nice. And I personally also feel that if you have a little variations and if the food is a little color, like different colors every time you eat, it's really good. Because many times
Mhm.
people have same food all the time and then they develop the allergy for that particular food. So which is also not good at
Exactly.
times. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And you do, and then all those things become less efficient too, right? I mean, that's why
Yeah.
mailmen don't have giant legs, because there's this adaptation that happens when you pose something, and now your body gets more and more efficient about dealing with it. So you have to change the stimulus. Right.
Yes.
It's the same thing
Yes.
with the workouts. That's the reason, that's the notion of progressive resistance, right? Is
Yes.
you have to keep increase, you have to keep changing it up a little bit, because once
Yes.
your body adapts, it's like, okay, no, I got this.
Yes.
and
Yes.
and
Yes.
and 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 then it gets to a point where, like you said, you start to develop allergies,
Allergies.
and
Exactly.
it becomes less, you tend to go to, it's that whole survival thing, right? Your body is like, okay, well, I'm not going to waste energy processing this anymore, because a lion might come and attack him, so we need to make sure that he's got some energy left for that, right?
Yes. Yes.
In a very sort of primal biological sense, your body adapts. And so by kind of, mixing it up, because there's certain things I could eat all the time, I know it's not good for me. I mean, and
Yeah.
even if they're healthy, like
Yes.
I love like purple cabbage, cilantro, and but there's an Indian restaurant that opened up in our community,
Okay.
and I love it because there's so many things that I've never had. And it's
Okay.
funny because I'll look at something and I think, oh, I bet that's going to be, no, it's going to be something completely different.
Different.
And
Yeah.
so it was so exciting, because it was like, oh my gosh, all these new experiences and these new textures and new spices and new seasoning and things. And so it's been fantastic. Where, I talked to a kid last week at the gym, and he's first of all, this kid should be eating like it's his job. He's trying to bulk up, and he's like super tight caloric, input. He's doing meal prep, and it's all the same. And I'm like, first of all, you're not going to be able to do this. Secondly, you should be eating it like it's your freaking job, because you need to put on about 25 pounds of mass and then worry about cutting. It's like it's like you have your foot on the gas and the brake at the same time.
Yes. Yes.
Um, anyhow,
Yeah, okay, great. That's great info. Did you had any injuries, or do you have any negative experience about kettlebell lifting?
not really. The grind, it's the mental thing I mentioned before, just getting
Yeah,
over the grind of it. It's constant technique. When I did move to, I mean, I always thought wristbands were kind of, little wussy. When I started doing, as my marathon training increased, it's like, yeah, no, and I thought about it. I'm thinking, well, why are you thinking that? It's just like, you think of a stonemason, right? They're not
yeah,
smashing these things. It's just that constant tap, 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 tap. And I don't want to end up with a stress fracture in my forearm. So I did get the kettle guards. And when I moved to full marathon, I got 2 sets. So I
okay,
wear 2 kettle guards on each arm for practice, because I don't want to get hurt in practice. If I'm going to get hurt, it's going to be on a platform, because I came to India to compete or something. I want to
yeah,
like be able to give it 100%. I don't want to get hurt in my garage.
yes,
And
yes, absolutely.
so that's, being mindful and making sure you're getting, I mean, and some, it's technique, but it's also, I mean, there is, even with the best technique, there's still a slight impact. And when you multiply that over 600-700 reps, it's a lot of tapping.
Yes, yes,
So
yes. Wow, great. Yeah, most of them do not really have any kind of injuries, but at times, if you really do not pay attention to the form and technique, because it's a repetition, and it can have a kind of a little impact on your shoulders, but you need to know where you need to stop. That's very important.
yep.
Yeah, and we have a connecting question with this is, see, when you're training, we at times pick up a coach, or probably we are self-coached because the experience have piled up. Now we know the programs and a lot of things. How about you, Craig? Do you have a coach? Do you believe in having a coach? Have you ever been taken a coach for your guidelines when you started kettlebell sport? And how it is to train with or without coach? Maybe if you can just share your experience on it.
So much I've had a coach. I have a coach now, Jordan.
Yeah.
He doesn't do marathon, but he's
Okay.
helps me with my technique.
Okay.
And that's been important. That's the piece. I mean, that's just the grind, right? It's like I've got to put in the time
Okay.
and I've got to be committed to that. But having a coach is super important in terms of the technique because otherwise you just Pavel talked about it. He talks about greasing the groove.
Yeah. I know that. Yeah.
It's that repetition, right? It's that,
Yeah.
and so the more you do it, if you're not doing it correctly, it's going to be super hard to unlearn that. So getting that proper instruction early so that you can build, be practicing on a solid foundation, right? I mean, it's like if you're building a wall, but underneath the wall, it's shifting, sooner or later, there's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And so in fact, that's why I'm excited about seeing Kim because then I'll have her work with me again. It's like, okay. And I'm actually going to Las Vegas tonight. And so I'm going to
Okay.
meet Moz and Dunk at his, and I'll pay him for just, help me, give me something that I can focus on
Okay.
and, look at the technique. And so I'm excited. I try to get different feedback, from different coaches. So
Different
Jordan
coaches.
helps me with kind
Okay.
of from a macro standpoint, from a
Okay.
technique standpoint, but then also just different set of eyes see a different thing. And sometimes it's just a cue, right?
Yes. Yes.
Sometimes
Yes.
it's something as simple as like I watched a lot of YouTube videos and there's a coach Rudnev out of Russia and he
Yeah.
was
Certainly.
talking about the
Yeah.
question I asked you before about thumb or pinky, right, on the
Yeah. Yeah.
backswing. And his coaching cue was just hold the bell and just close your eyes, and whatever way your hand naturally rotates, that's the way you should be doing it.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, I didn't get that because I was always trying to like pound a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
Well, oh, this guy does it this way, and he's like,
Yes.
that more about adaptability of making it fit your sense. So,
Yes. Yes.
and then
Okay.
also like on the downswing, are you going straight back or are you doing it on, is the downward motion, is it straight or is it coming across kind of on an angle? Now, in hard style, they'd be like, no, 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 it's this. But in sports, like, well, this is maybe more efficient movement for you. So I've noticed over time, I started to shift. And when I start, when I'm more fatigued, it's a little bit more of a cross motion as opposed to straight down.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, how's this feel? How do I, and then trying to get the feedback, like, okay, how's this feel? Is it working from a performance standpoint? And is my body responding well to it? Or
Yes.
is my body going? So if I do straight pinky down on a swing, my body doesn't like that,
Okay.
you know?
Okay.
So,
So every
trying to,
individual is different. Every person is having different technique, and
right,
whatever technique you
exactly.
adapt, that's how you grow. Yeah.
But also having a coach to say, affirm that rather than me just going off and doing it and then getting 4,000 reps in and then going, you're losing, not measuring, right? Because it's like, oh, you've lost, you're losing, and this is going to sound minute, but if you're losing half a rep, if your pace is off by half a rep over a minute, that's over a marathon, that's a lot,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Compiling for 30 minutes, it's going to be few reps down, maybe 20. And that's a big number.
That's a big number. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Wow. Wow, great. That's a great interaction. I think this was one of my technical podcast. A lot of information I have also learned from you. And I guess you are having a lot of insight from different coaches, plus you're traveling and plus you're doing yourself at this age. It's really a great work done by you because a very few people would be interested to get and deep and deep dive into different coaches to understand what the different programs. So you have got a good information for this podcast, and I'm sure people will like this.
Well, I
That's
hope
great.
so. Thanks. I get, you can tell I like it. I mean, maybe I should have like, had a conversation about it before. So maybe I didn't come to this with so much juice, but I mean, I love it. I mean, I love the whole thing. I love the sport. I love the people.
Community,
I
yeah,
love the
it's a,
way I feel. And, it's one of those things. There's just something about it that's very primal that just feels good. When you hold the bell in your hand, it's like if I think about it, if I had to be on a treadmill for 40 years, I just blow my brains out. I mean, it'd just be so horrible. Or, I do a Pilates class. It's like, I don't want to have to check my manhood at the door. I want something that just feels primal and strong. And there's just, you grab that metal and it's like, I love it. I
yeah,
mean, every time I pick up a bell, I'm like, yeah, baby, this just, you know, it's
yes,
awesome.
yeah,
So
yeah, great. Great. So, if you can just share your best numbers, Greg, in marathon, 10-minute classic, maybe if you're doing 60 minutes, if you have done 60 minutes, if you can just share the numbers with our viewers.
ooh, that's a hard one. I did, well, first time I did half was last year at the Arnold. So I drove 16 hours to Columbus, Ohio, and I did the Arnold. It was supposed to be a qualifier, and then they lost their affiliation. So we
Okay.
just got a crappy medal. But I did 20 kilo half marathon. I did 290 reps. And then I did
Okay.
half marathon at the Twin Cities with a 20 kilo, and I got it up to 332. So it was a pretty substantial increase from March until the end of October.
Okay.
Um, First time I did full marathon in an event was in Belgium. I did the qualifier with a 16 kilo. I competed with an 18. I did 588 reps. But again, it was one of those days where it was a bad day. You'll like this as kettlebell guy. I didn't know, I hadn't done it in person, so I wasn't aware I needed to make sure I had an attendant. So there were a couple guys from Ireland who were like, because you can't set the bell down for people who don't know in marathon or half marathon. You can't set the bell down, but
Yeah.
you can chalk, you can get a towel, somebody can hand you a towel or they can hand you a drink. So the two coaches from Ireland were sitting there and they go, "Hey, do you need a towel?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be great." So they came over and I had met these guys before. So, and it was a hard session. I mean, it was just one of those where every fiber wanted to set it down, but I was too embarrassed to have my daughter and my wife there and set it down. So I just grinded it out.
Oh,
Well, at
okay.
about 3 minutes left, I knew I was going to finish. So now my ego kicks in. I'm like, all right, got to step it up. So now I'm zipping along, except at about 40 seconds left, I get nauseous. And I'm like,
Okay.
I'm going to throw up. I don't want to throw up on the judges. So I blame these guys, Del Wilson and all these guys from the UK, Graham Norris, because they were telling me about somebody who did this. So I ended up doing it. Is you pulled my t-shirt out and I threw up in my own shirt inside my own t-shirt because if you set the belt.
I think we lost the voice. Are you able to hear me? Okay. So I guess some voice.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Now. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
for.
And so I ended up getting free beer from the Irish guys. They liked that. But
Yeah.
my best scores in 10 minute, I did with a 24 kilo, I did 110 snatches, which 24 kilo for me was a challenge.
Okay.
I earned CMS with 16s at Oakland and a couple other competitions in long cycle and biathlon.
Okay.
So those are kind of my numbers.
Okay.
But I feel like I'm at peaked. I'm not, I, even though as I get older, I'm in a different way, I'm in a different category. The bells go down. That's not my objective. My objective is to keep moving up. The event that I'm doing in Kansas is a qualifier for Portugal in June.
No,
And
Hungary. Hungary.
or Hungary. Yes, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Hungary.
Yeah.
And so if I can make it through to that, my goal would be to try to be able to do a half with 24.
Okay.
So that would
Good
be
luck.
that's kind of my I'm going to qualify at a 16. So I mean, I should I should be able to do pretty good numbers with the 16, but there's
Okay.
no gap with this particular organization where like with with IKMF, they have, you can do, you can go in 2 kilo increments. So I
Yes.
was able to, they could do a 20, an 18 or 22, not just
22.
20s.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So like 22, I think I could do, I know I could get through a half with 22s, because I've done a couple with 20s. 24, that would be a
It's
big
a little
stretch.
tough. Yeah. 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 Okay.
Yeah.
A little more training, probably. Wow. So now we are pretty much on the end of the podcast. If
Yeah.
you
No, I
would like
appreciate all your
to
time. Thank you.
share the message to the viewers, what message do you want to give for the men lifters who are above 45 want to get into the kettlebell sport?
Just do it. I mean, start off, get some proper instruction, and just hang in there with it. It's analogous to everything else you do in your life. You're going to hit a sticking point, and you just that constant training of pushing through it. It has a lot of transferability to other important areas in your life. So
That's a great message, Greg. Great. So thank you very much, Greg, for your time. Most important because I guess you're traveling today. So I wish you a great travel to Vegas, and I would look forward to meet you in one of the competitions. I'm sure in 2023 this year, if possible. If we are getting meeting up in the Hungary, we'll be able to meet up and have a talk. Maybe have a coffee together and have a same kind of discussion again.
I would love it. And I'd love to, spend more time, getting your background and, tapping
Sure,
into your wisdom too. And, I'm sure you can help me iron out some of the kinks. So thank you for
sure.
all the time.
Thank
This
you.
was an absolute pleasure. So
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good luck.